Buddhāvataṃsaka Sutra. Book 39. Entry into the Realm of Reality. Video 15. Anala. Recalling those spiritual benefactors one after another, focusing his attention on the instructions of those spiritual benefactors, rejoicing in himself at being in the care of spiritual benefactors, reflecting that through the protection of spiritual benefactors he would never lose the way to supreme perfect enlightenment, Sadhana became joyful, serene, pleased, happy, calm, broad-minded. He attained adornment of mind, non-attachment of mind, non-obstruction of mind, aloofness of mind, unification of mind, control of mind, extraordinary power of mind, mental conformity with the teaching, mental pervasion of lands, mental beatification by the vision of Buddha, and constant mental focus on the 10 powers. He made his way from country to country, village to village, place to place, searching, till he came to the city of Taladvaja, where he asked after the whereabouts of King Anala. He was told, King Anala is on the throne carrying out his royal duties for the welfare of the populace. He governs the communities, punishes those who should be punished, promotes those who deserve promotion, chastises criminals, settles disputes, comforts and encourages the wretched and dejected, subdues the wild and arrogant. He puts a stop to the injury of living beings, theft, desire for others' spouses, falsehood, slander, harsh or violent talk, and divisive talk. He frees us from craving, malice, and false ideas. Then Sadhana went to King Anala and saw him sitting on a great jeweled lion throne brilliant with diamonds, set on legs of countless varieties of luminous jewels, with beautiful figurines inlaid with jewels, arrayed with cowrie shells on golden threads, lit by many jewel lamps, in a lotus calyx made of magic gems, spread with many precious celestial robes, perfumed with various celestial incenses, embellished with 100,000 jeweled parasols, adorned with 100,000 jeweled banners, beautified by trailing flower garlands made of varicolored jewels, covered by a canopy of various celestial jewels. The king was young and handsome, with the marks and embellishments of a great man, wearing a crown of wish-fulfilling jewels, his forehead adorned with golden crescents, pure blue sapphire earrings hanging from his ears, a breastplate radiant with jewels on his chest, bracelets of the finest celestial gems on his arms, shaded by a large precious parasol with a cane of pure lapis lazuli and 1,000 ribs of jewels with a gold covering, a wreath of jewel bells sweetly ringing, illumining all directions with its luster. The king had great regal power. His rule was invincible to enemy armies, his sovereignty was free of danger from enemy armies. Sadhana saw 10,000 ministers gathered around the king conducting the affairs of state. He also saw 10,000 torturers before the king, looking like the warders of hell, of violent, terrifying appearance, holding swords, axes, spears, clubs, and impaling stakes, involved in punishing those to be punished. He saw criminals, thieves, bandits, murderers, troublemakers, rapists, and so on, brought bound before King Anala and saw the king deal out appropriate punishments, by the king's order. Some had their hands and feet cut off, some had their ears and noses cut off, some had their eyes gouged out, some had their limbs or heads cut off, some had their whole bodies burned by fire, some were being dismembered, crippled, burnt, sprinkled with acid. Sadhana watched them undergoing such harsh, injurious, and deadly punishments, and saw a mountainous heap of rendered body parts on the execution ground, and a tremendous torrent of blood. He also saw animals and birds eating the mutilated corpses there. He also saw some of the corpses hideously decomposing. He also heard the screams and cries of those being mutilated and killed, as terrifying as hell. Seeing that dreadful, horrifying butchery, Sadhana thought, I have set out for supreme perfect enlightenment for the sake of the welfare and happiness of all beings, and am devoted to pursuing the practice of enlightening beings. I ask spiritual benefactors what good an enlightening being should do and what evil one should avoid. This King Anala, though, is devoid of goodness, an evildoer, malicious, a killer and oppressor, without regard for others, doomed to a miserable fate. So how can I hear about the practice of enlightening beings from him? As Sadhana was thinking this, concerned with saving all sentient beings, his mind full of compassion, celestial beings in the sky over his head called out, Do you not remember the instructions of the Sirjayoshmayatana? Sadhana looked up and said, I do. The celestials said, Do not give rise to doubt about the instructions of spiritual benefactors. They guide you on the right way. Indeed, the practical knowledge of skill in means of enlightening beings is inconceivable. The knowledge of how to take care of all sentient beings is inconceivable. The knowledge of how to benefit sentient beings is inconceivable. The knowledge of how to restrain sentient beings is inconceivable. The knowledge of how to further sentient beings is inconceivable. The knowledge of how to care for sentient beings is inconceivable. The knowledge of how to protect sentient beings is inconceivable. The knowledge of how to purify sentient beings is inconceivable. The knowledge of how to liberate sentient beings is inconceivable. The knowledge of how to perfect sentient beings is inconceivable. The knowledge of how to guide sentient beings is inconceivable. Go ask the king about the practice of enlightening beings. Hearing the words of the celestials, Sadhana went to King Anala, paid his respects, and said, Noble one, I have set my mind on supreme perfect enlightenment. But I do not know how to learn and carry out the practice of enlightening beings. I hear that you give instruction to enlightening beings. Pray tell me how to learn and apply the practice of enlightening beings. King Anala, having finished his duties, got off the throne and took Sadhana into the palace. Entering his own residence, the king seated Sadhana on a seat of honor and said to him, Look at the furnishings of my house. Sadhana looked and saw that the house was large, with walls of 7 precious substances, adorned with terraces of various jewels, embellished with hundreds of thousands of jewel towers, blazing with the radiance of inconceivable numbers of jewels, with pillars made of various jewels. In it were hundreds of thousands of variously adorned jewel lion chairs. Jeweled regal banners flew overhead. It was covered with canopies of radiant jewels, draped with various webs of magical gems, decorated with countless ornaments of various jewels, complete with cool emerald lotus ponds, surrounded by rows of trees of all kinds of jewels. He also saw the king's 100,000,000 ladies, all extremely beautiful, versed in all the arts, diligent, kind-hearted, and attentive. Then King Anala said to Sadhana, "What do you think? Could such fruits of action come to a villain? Could a villain attain such a condition, with such a retinue, such riches, such power?" Sadhana said, "No indeed, noble one." The king said, "I have attained enlightening being's magical liberation. The people in my realm are given to all sorts of evil-doing, murder, theft, rape, falsehood, slander, vilification, divisive talk, covetousness, malice, false views, villainy, violence, cruelty. I am unable to turn them away from evil-doing by any other means, so in order to subdue them, mature them, guide them, and secure their welfare, out of compassion I have illusory executioners kill and maim illusory criminals, making a display of intense suffering and pain. Seeing this, the people in my realm become afraid to do evil. Seeing the people alarmed by this device, I have them give up evil-doing and conduct themselves virtuously. Then I establish them in ultimate security, the end of all suffering, the bliss of omniscience. I do not harm anyone by thought, word, or deed. I would sooner go to the deepest hell than so much as think of hurting even a dumb animal or an insect, much less a human being, who has potential for virtuous conduct. I do not do anything bad even in dreams, much less while awake. I have attained this magical enlightening being's liberation. How can I know the practice or tell the virtues of the enlightening beings who have attained acceptance of the truth of non-origination, who relate to all states of being as illusions, who understand that the practices of enlightening beings are like magical creations, who know that all worlds are like reflections, who comprehend that the nature of things is like a dream, who conform to the principle of the reality realm by non-attachment, who accomplish the network of interrelated practices, who are in the sphere of unimpeded knowledge, who know the way of universally comprehensive concentration, who are masters of endlessly progressing mental command, who are intent on the sphere of Buddhahood. South of here is a city called Suprabha, where a king named Mahaprabha lives. Go ask him how to learn and carry out the practice of enlightening beings. So then Sadhana paid his respects and left King Anala. Mahaprabha, remembering that magic of knowledge, meditating on that magical liberation of enlightening beings, contemplating that magical nature, realizing the equality of the illusoriness of all actions, reflecting on the equal illusoriness of phenomena, following the equality of didactic developmental magical creations, remembering the inconceivable light born of knowledge, undertaking the magical performance of endless vows, purifying the magical nature of unattached conduct, thinking about the magical character of past, present, and future, Sadhana made his way from country to country, looking everywhere, high and low, over even and rough terrain, wet and dry places, mountains and valleys, villages, cities, towns, provinces, and capitals, tireless in body and mind, searching everywhere till he came to the environs of the great city Suprabha. He asked where King Mahaprabha was, and people pointed out the great city Suprabha and told him the king lived there. So then Sadhana went to the city and was delighted upon seeing it. He thought, where does the spiritual benefactor live? I shall see the spiritual benefactor today and hear from him about the practice of enlightening beings, the way of emancipation of enlightening beings, the inconceivable nature of enlightening beings, the inconceivable range of virtues of enlightening beings, the inconceivable majesty of enlightening beings, the inconceivable concentration of enlightening beings, the inconceivable freedom of enlightening beings, and the inconceivable purity of accomplishment of great undertakings of enlightening beings. With these thoughts in mind, Sadhana went into the great city Suprabha. Once he was there, Sadhana looked around the city. It was beautiful, made of 7 precious substances: gold, silver, lapis lazuli, crystal, red pearl, emerald, and coral. It was surrounded by deep moats made of the 7 precious substances, with gold sand on the bottom, their surfaces covered with heavenly lotuses, and particles of sandalwood suspended in the water. The city was also surrounded by rows of palm trees made of the 7 precious substances, and enclosed by walls made of 7 kinds of diamonds, majestic, insuperable, indestructible, invincible, without obstacle, blazing with light, free from impurities. Each of the diamond walls was also inlaid with countless jewels, inset with gold posts and adorned with garlands of ivory and jewels. The gates of the city, at intervals of 10 leagues on 8 sides, were beautifully constructed of the 7 precious substances. The city was large, a symmetrical octagon, set on a ground of blue lapis lazuli. There were 10 million streets in the city, each one lined on both sides with hundreds of thousands of mansions made of various precious substances and adorned with arrays of many kinds of gems, flying jewel banners and flags, fully furnished, with millions of people living in them. The city was also adorned with countless temples of gold and jewels, countless gold towers arrayed with innumerable jewels and covered with nets of lapis lazuli, countless silver towers arrayed with innumerable jewels and covered with nets of red pearls, countless lapis lazuli towers arrayed with innumerable jewels and covered with nets of varicolored jewels, countless crystal towers arrayed with innumerable jewels and covered with nets of diamonds, countless luminous jewel towers arrayed with innumerable jewels and covered with nets of sunny jewels, countless sapphire towers arrayed with innumerable jewels and covered with nets of radiant jewels, countless diamond towers arrayed with innumerable jewels and covered with nets of unsurpassed jewels, countless sandalwood towers arrayed with innumerable jewels and covered with nets of celestial flowers, countless towers of incomparable fragrances arrayed with innumerable jewels and covered with nets of heavenly flowers, all adorned with turrets of many jewels, encircled with balconies of 7 precious substances, surrounded by rows of jewel trees. The turrets of the towers and the nets of jewels were also interconnected by jewel strings, and those strings were adorned with garlands of golden bells, to each of which were fastened strings of various jewels, from each of which hung circlets of small bells. Also the whole city was covered with countless nets of jewels, bells, celestial fragrances, heavenly flowers, and jewel figurines, with countless canopies of diamonds, various jewels, jeweled parasols, jewel pavilions, precious cloths, and jewel flower garlands, with variously jeweled banners and pennants flying overhead. The house of King Mahaprabha was built in the middle of the city. It was 4 leagues wide on each side. Made of the 7 precious substances, it was surrounded by arbors made of these 7 precious substances in various combinations, decorated with nets of precious bells making pleasant sweet sounds. It was surrounded by 7 rows of palm trees made of the 7 precious substances and adorned with 100,000 towers made of inconceivable numbers of various jewels. The house was embellished with lotus ponds, made of jewels, their surfaces covered with celestial flowers, their floors spread with gold sand, with steps made of jewel bricks arrayed on 4 sides, graced with trees with jewel flowers and fruits. Pleasant sounds of birds warbling filled the air. It was like the palace of a celestial king. In the middle stood a tower of world-illumining jewels, wonderful, beautiful, brilliant with its inconceivable arrays of countless jewels, built by the King Mahaprabha as a treasury of good law. Then Sadhana, not drawn by the jewel moats, not amazed by the jewel walls, not attracted by the jewel trees, not relishing the sound of the jewel bells, unattached to the sweet sounds of celestial songs, not paying any attention to the various precious furnishings of the apartments and towers, while in the midst of the joyful crowds of people enjoying the pleasure of the way of enlightenment, detached from pleasures of the senses, intent on contemplation of the truth, constantly asking everyone he met about spiritual benefactors, made his way to a crossroads in the city. Looking around at the crossroads, he saw King Mahaprabha there, not far from his venerable abode, seated on a magnificent throne. The throne had legs of blue lapis lazuli and was set on a lion made of white lapis lazuli. It was arrayed with nets of cowries on gold strings and varicolored precious clothes surpassing those of the gods, and ornamented with countless jewel figures. It was covered with a network of inconceivable numbers of jewels, and above was a beautiful gold silk canopy with multicolored decorations of celestial jewels. The throne of the great law was in the shape of the calyx of a lotus made of wish-fulfilling gems, and the king sat cross-legged thereon, graced with the 32 marks of a great person, adorned with the various embellishments of the virtuous. He was like a mountain of gold, brilliant as a mine of jewels, blazing with light like the orb of the sun, of placid appearance like the full moon, an oceanic accumulation of endless virtues of the profound teaching, like a great cloud thundering the sound of inherent nature, like the sky studded with stars of maxims of the teaching, like the polar mountain appearing to the minds of the ocean of sentient beings, like an island of jewels covered with various gems of knowledge. Sadhana also saw heaps of jewels, pearls, conch shells, camphor, coral, gold, and silver, heaps of celestial robes, heaps of celestial jewelry, heaps of food, and heaps of the finest delicacies arrayed before the king. He also saw millions of celestial chariots, celestial musical instruments, mounds of celestial incenses, many medicinal preparations, and many collections of all kinds of utensils, suitable and proper for people to enjoy as they wish. He also saw hundreds of thousands of milk cows with golden horns and hoofs, provided to care for the poor. He also saw many millions of beautiful girls, adorned with all kinds of jewelry, dressed in heavenly clothes, limbs anointed with sandalwood perfume, versed in all the arts and skilled in all manners of love play. All the kinds of goods that were before the king were also set out in countless numbers on the street corners, in front of every house, along both sides of every street, to support the population, to make everyone happy, joyful, serene, and comfortable, to extinguish their afflictions, to introduce them to the meaning of the nature of all things, to get them all to have omniscience as their common aim, to rid them of malice toward others, to stop them from all evil action and talk, to extract the thorns of views, and to purify their course of action. At that point Sadhana went up to King Mahaprabha, paid his respects, and said, "Noble one, I have set my mind on supreme perfect enlightenment, but I do not know how to learn and carry out the practices of enlightening beings. I hear you give enlightening beings instruction, and ask you to tell me how to study and accomplish the practice of enlightening beings." The king said, "I purify and fulfill the enlightening being's practice, which is characterized by great benevolence. This practice I have asked about, purified, ordered, observed, carried out, pursued, entered into, diversified, and expanded in the company of hundreds, thousands, millions indeed, untold numbers of Buddhas. Based on this enlightening practice of great benevolence, I command kingship justly, I treat the world justly, I pass through the world justly, I lead the people justly, I bring justice to people and turn them to the sphere of right, I give them right guidance, I saturate them with justice, I direct them to attainment of what is right, I get them to contemplate the nature of things. I establish people in kindness, in the command of great kindness, in the power of kindness, in altruism, in goodwill, in sympathy, in friendliness, in hospitality, in determination to get rid of all suffering, in conduct conducive to ultimate happiness. I cool their minds and remove their mental tangles by producing the bliss of cessation. I divert their continuity of mind attached to delight in mundane routines and purify it in enjoyment of the pleasures of truth. I purify them of all unwholesome qualities and turn them away from what is not good. I turn back the flow of the mundane whirl. I destroy their ignorance in the ocean of principles of the reality realm, to cut off rebirth in all states of being. I inspire them to attain omniscience. I calm the ocean of their minds, to generate the indestructible power of faith. Thus do I govern righteously based on this enlightening practice of great benevolence. Furthermore, no one goes away from me intimidated, threatened, or frightened. If any poor people lacking in means of subsistence come to me seeking food or drink or clothing or any other need, I open the royal storehouse to them and allow them to take from there, or from the streets and crossroads of the city, whatever they need, things they would otherwise get involved in wrongdoing to get. All the inhabitants of this city are enlightening beings established in the great vehicle. They see this city according to the purity of their minds. Some see it small, some large. Some see a ground of earth, some see a ground spread with lapis lazuli. Some see clay walls, some see it surrounded by walls covered with the finest cloth, banners, and jewels. Some see it full of gravel and sand, uneven, with a lot of ravines. Some see the ground spread with large jewels, decorated and flat as the palm of the hand. Some see it beautifully arrayed with mansions and palaces, with round windows, nets, crescents, jewels, and various other adornments. Even among those who live outside the city, those whose minds are pure, who have made roots of goodness, who have attended many Buddhas who are aiming for omniscience, and who make omniscience their ultimate goal, see it as made of jewels. Those whom I took care of in the course of past enlightening practice by means of charity, kindness, assistance, and cooperation see it this way, while others see it as made of clay. Whenever the inhabitants of my domain want to do anything wrong in the degenerate world, their natures disturbed by the times, in order to save them I go into an enlightening concentration guided by great benevolence called adapting to the faculties of the world, whereupon their fears, misfortunes, animosities, quarrels, agitations, and hostilities cease. That happens as a matter of course by the achievement of the nature of the enlightening concentration adapting to the faculties of the world, which is guided by great benevolence. Come here and you shall see for yourself in a moment. At that point the king entered that concentration, whereupon the whole city as well as the provinces of the kingdom quaked. As they shook, the jewel walls, jewel temples, jewel treasuries, jewel houses, jewel mansions, jewel palaces, jewel towers, jewel windows, jewel balconies, jewel arches, jewel crescents, jewel domes, jewel statues, jewel canopies, jewel bells, jewel banners, and jewel trees gave off beautiful, pleasant sounds and bowed toward King Mahaprabha. The inhabitants of the city Suprabha, ecstatic, prostrated themselves in the king's direction. The inhabitants of the rest of the domain, refreshed and joyful, bowed toward the king. Even the animals, in friendship and harmony with each other, bowed toward the king. Even the mountains and hills all bowed toward the king. All the trees and plants also bowed toward the king. All the lakes, ponds, streams, and rivers in the domain flowed toward the king. 10,000 water spirits sent subtly aromatic rains from clouds of fragrant water, with thunder and lightning. 10,000 celestial beings adorned the sky with countless clouds of celestial music, goddesses sweetly singing, clouds raining celestial jewel flowers, clouds raining various celestial fragrances, garlands, aromatic powders, jewelry, robes, parasols, banners, and pennants blazing with the radiance of jewels, presenting these to the king as tokens of respect. The chief of the water spirits also adorned the sky with a covering of countless clouds of celestial jewel lotuses, countless trailing ornaments of celestial jewel necklaces, streamers, garlands, ornaments, and lies, countless clouds of all-pervading celestial fragrances, countless clouds raining celestial cloths, incense balls, and aromatic powders, and countless clouds of nymphs playing sweet music and singing hymns of praise, producing these in the sky by the inconceivable power of the chief water spirit. Also, countless hundreds of thousands of sea and land goblins, malevolent beings who feed on flesh and blood and consume the vitality of fish, birds, animals, and humans, all became benevolent, placid, intent on not harming any creatures, and sympathetic to other beings. They joined their hands in respect and most joyfully bowed to the king, experiencing mental and physical bliss. Hundreds of thousands of other kinds of fiends and malevolent spirits, also becoming benevolent, placid, intent on not harming any creature, and sympathetic to other beings, joined their hands in respect and most joyfully bowed to the king, experiencing physical and mental bliss. In this way all the fears, misfortunes, animosities, quarrels, agitations, and hostilities of all creatures on earth ceased. And as this happened on earth, so did it also happen throughout the galaxy, in as many as 10 duodecillion worlds. This was by the achievement of the nature of the enlightening concentration adapting to the faculties of the world, which is guided by great benevolence. Then King Mahaprabha came out of that concentration and said to Sadhana, I know this medium of the light of knowledge of practice of enlightening beings which is characterized by great benevolence. How can I know the practice? Tell the virtues, measure the mountain of merit, view the myriad stars of virtuous qualities, encompass the atmosphere of great vows, measure the power of impartiality toward things, clarify the forms of arrangements of the vehicle of universal salvation, express the excellences of the principles of universally good practice, open the doors of cultivation of great enlightening concentrations, or describe the clouds of great compassion, of the enlightening beings who are like immeasurable umbrellas of great benevolence, filling all beings with happiness, who are inseparable companions to all beings, who have set out to save all beings, working equally with the superior, inferior, and middling, whose benevolence is as impartial as the earth, supporting all beings, who are impartial as the full moon, shining the light of virtue and knowledge equally on all beings, who are impartial as the sun, illumining the world with knowledge of all that can be known, who are like great lamps, dispelling the darkness in the recesses of all beings' minds, who are like water clarifying jewels, removing the turbidity of deceit and guile from the water of beings' minds, who are like wish-fulfilling jewels, fulfilling the aspirations of all beings, who are like a gale, driving all beings into the citadel of omniscience with its houses of concentration and equilibrium. South of here is a kingdom called Sthira, where a devotee named Achala lives. Go ask her how to learn and carry out the practice of enlightening beings. So Sadhana paid his respects to King Mahaprabha and left. Continue to video 16.